I never expected anything unusual from a simple message that appeared on my phone that evening. My brother's friend, someone who had always been around our house since childhood, sent a short text, "Are you free? I want to show you something at my place." It felt casual, normal, nothing to overthink. He had always been friendly, always smiling warmly whenever I walked into the room. Still, a small part of me wondered why he wanted me specifically. My brother wasn't home that day, and the house felt strangely silent. I kept looking at the phone, unsure if I should go. He had never invited me alone before. Usually, he asked both of us or messaged in the group chat. But this time it was direct, personal. I replied with a simple, "Okay," trying not to read too much into it. His house wasn't far. The walk felt longer than usual, maybe because I couldn't understand why I suddenly felt nervous. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Still, something about the thought of seeing him made my chest feel tight. When I reached his door, he opened it almost instantly, like he had been waiting. His smile was gentle, familiar, but there was something else, something warm in his eyes that made me shift my gaze for a moment. Inside, his house was quiet. Only a lamp in the corner lit the room. He had arranged everything neatly, almost as if he was expecting someone special. He asked me to sit, his voice soft and welcoming. I tried to relax, but I felt strangely aware of everything, the way he looked at me, the way he kept brushing his fingers against his own hands like he was nervous too. We started talking about simple things at first, work, family, random stories. But slowly, the conversation drifted into more personal territory. He asked how I had been feeling lately, if I was stressed, if I was lonely. It was surprising how much he noticed. He remembered things I had mentioned months ago, tiny details that even I had forgotten. No one really listened to me that way, not even my own friends. The more we talked, the more I felt something stir inside me. It wasn't physical. It was emotional, deep, like someone had reached into the part of me that I never showed anyone. His attention felt comforting, but at the same time, dangerous. I kept reminding myself that he was my brother's friend. Getting close to him like this felt wrong. Still, he kept watching me with an expression that made my heart beat faster. At one point, he gently asked if he could show me something in another room. It sounded innocent, so I said yes. The room was small, filled with memories, old pictures, letters, small items he had collected. He told me he liked keeping things that mattered to him. Then, almost as if he couldn't hold it in anymore, he admitted that he had always felt comfortable talking to me, even more than with my brother. His words made my breath catch. I didn't know what to say. I felt warmth rising in my chest, but I also felt guilt. I wasn't supposed to feel special because of someone connected so closely to my family. Yet when he looked at me, it felt impossible to ignore the meaning behind his eyes. We sat back in the living room, and something subtle changed. The silence between us grew heavier, not awkward, but full of unspoken emotions. He moved a little closer, not touching me, just sitting near enough that I could feel his presence. I didn't pull away. I didn't know why. He asked gently if I ever felt like hiding feelings because I was scared someone might judge me. I froze for a moment. The way he asked wasn't random. It felt like he was trying to open a door, giving me a chance to step in if I wanted to. I didn't answer at first, but inside, I knew exactly what he meant. As we talked, his voice calm and soft, I felt myself drifting into a space I shouldn't have entered, a space where emotions crossed boundaries. My thoughts kept flashing back to my brother, to the trust between us. But in that moment, all I could feel was the strange, magnetic pull between me and the person sitting next to me. By the time I realized how late it had become, the air between us had changed completely. Something had sparked, quiet, undeniable, and dangerous. When I finally stood to leave, he looked at me as if he wanted to say something more, something final. But he didn't. He simply watched me with that same warm, conflicted expression, and I walked out with a heart that felt heavier than when I arrived. For the next 2 days, I couldn't stop thinking about that evening. Every moment replayed in my mind, the softness in his voice, the closeness in his eyes, the way the silence between us felt like a secret neither of us had the courage to break. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking, but the feeling didn't go away. It stayed with me like a quiet echo in my chest. He messaged again, not long, not dramatic, just a simple, Did you reach home safely the other day? I was thinking about our conversation. Those words alone were enough to make my heart tighten. He didn't have to add anything else, the tone itself carried something unspoken. I typed slowly, trying to sound normal. Yes, safely, everything's fine, but he replied almost immediately, are you sure? It was that question, gentle, caring, that made me stop pretending. I told him, I'm okay, just thinking a lot. He replied with a voice note this time, his tone warm and calm. He said he understood, and that thinking too much wasn't always a bad thing. He said he wanted to see me again, not to talk about anything heavy, but just to spend time together. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When I arrived at his place the second time, the atmosphere felt different. Not tense, but expectant, as if we both knew what this meeting meant. He opened the door slowly, smiling as if he had been waiting all day. Inside, the room felt warmer, softer, like he had intentionally made it welcoming. I tried to ignore how my pulse quickened. We didn't talk at first. We just sat, the television quietly playing something neither of us paid attention to. He kept glancing at me with the same conflicted softness I had seen before. Eventually, he asked if I had been confused about the other night. I nodded, unable to speak. He didn't push, he just waited, giving me space to breathe. Finally, I admitted that something felt different, something I didn't fully understand. His expression shifted, gentle relief mixed with nervousness. He told me he had felt it too, not just that night but for a long time. He said he had noticed things about me nobody else noticed, and he cared about me in a way he couldn't explain. Hearing those words made everything inside me stir. I felt guilty, but also strangely relieved, like he had spoken a truth I had been avoiding. I asked him why he never said anything before. He looked at the floor for a moment, then confessed that he didn't want to ruin his friendship with my brother or put me in a difficult position. He said he thought he could ignore it, but being around me only made his feelings stronger. The room felt heavy with emotions. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, feeling everything at once, guilt, fear, curiosity, and something deeper that I didn't want to name yet. He moved slightly closer, not touching me, just enough to show he was there if I needed him. We talked for a long time. Not about dramatic things, but about ourselves, about the things we hide, the emotions we pretend not to feel. His honesty disarmed me. He admitted that the thought of hurting anyone terrified him, but the thought of never expressing his feelings hurt even more. At one point, our hands brushed lightly on the couch. It wasn't intentional, but neither of us pulled away. His touch was warm, steady, and unexpectedly calming. It felt like a line had been crossed without either of us saying a word. I didn't resist, though a part of me whispered that I should. He asked quietly if I was scared. I said yes. He admitted he was too. But in that shared fear, there was something strangely comforting, like we were stepping into the unknown together. The closeness between us grew heavier, stronger. I felt drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain, like a force I didn't have control over. The silence between us began to feel too intimate, too charged. He looked at me with an expression full of questions he didn't dare to speak. And I knew he was waiting, not for permission, but for clarity. For a sign that I felt what he felt. I didn't give an answer with words, I didn't know how. But the way I looked back at him said enough. In that moment, everything changed. Not because of touch or action, but because we allowed ourselves to acknowledge a truth that had been quietly growing. Emotional infidelity, deep, undeniable, had already begun. And as I sat there beside him, feeling both terrified and alive, I knew this connection was something neither of us could easily walk away from. The morning after our second meeting, I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest. Nothing had happened between us physically, yet everything had changed. The emotional closeness, the way our hands had lingered, the unspoken confession hanging in the air, it all stayed with me like a shadow. I kept telling myself I needed distance, that it would fade if I just ignored it. But the more I tried to push it away, the more it pulled me back. He didn't message that day, and the silence only made things worse. I kept checking my phone, wondering why I suddenly felt emptier without his words. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He was my brother's friend. I had crossed a line just by letting my feelings reach this far. The silence stretched into the next morning before he finally sent a short message, "Are you free today? I want to talk." My heart skipped. A part of me wanted to refuse, but another part, stronger, deeper, needed to see him again. I agreed, telling myself it was only for closure, that we needed to set boundaries before things spiraled beyond control. When I arrived at his house, he looked different. Not physically, his face was the same, but there was a seriousness in his eyes, like he had spent the night thinking about us just as much as I had. He asked me to sit, and for the first time, he didn't hide the worry in his voice. He said he had been struggling with guilt. He didn't want to hurt anyone, especially my brother, and he didn't want to drag me into a situation that could damage relationships. But he also admitted that pretending nothing existed between us was becoming impossible. Every time we talked, every time he saw me, something in him deepened instead of fading. Listening to him felt like hearing my own thoughts spoken out loud. I told him I felt the same confusion, the same pull mixed with guilt. I didn't know how to define what was happening between us, but I knew it wasn't something we could ignore anymore. He nodded slowly, like he already knew. The conversation grew heavier as we talked about consequences. What if my brother found out? What if our families got involved? What if this feeling was just temporary, just a moment of emotional weakness? Or what if it was something real, something neither of us had expected? He looked at me with a softness that made my heart ache. He said he didn't want to force anything on me. If I felt we needed to step away, he would do it. He would distance himself completely, even if it hurt. He said he didn't want to be the reason I carried guilt for the rest of my life. The words hit me harder than I expected. The idea of cutting him off, of pretending none of this ever happened, felt like losing something I hadn't even fully experienced yet. But staying close to him meant walking a path filled with complications and emotional consequences. We sat in silence for a long time, both of us fighting our own thoughts. The quiet between us wasn't tense anymore, it was sad, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. He finally whispered that sometimes life brings people into our path for reasons we don't understand, and feelings aren't always something we choose. His honesty broke something inside me. I told him I didn't know what the right decision was, but I knew I couldn't lie, to myself or to him. I cared about him, deeply, more than I should, and trying to deny that would only make things worse. He looked like he wasn't sure whether to smile or cry. We agreed on one thing, whatever happened next, we needed time. Time to figure ourselves out. Time to understand whether this was just emotional confusion or something real enough to fight for. We promised to give each other space but not to disappear completely. As I stood to leave, he walked me to the door. He didn't touch me, didn't say anything dramatic. But the way he looked at me, quiet, intense, full of emotion, was enough to make my chest tighten. I stepped outside with my heart torn in two directions. Walking away from his house felt heavier than ever. I didn't know what the future held, whether we would grow apart or grow deeper, whether honesty would bring us closer or break everything around us. But one thing was clear, emotional infidelity isn't just about betrayal, it's about the moments that change you, the feelings that rewrite your boundaries, the connections you never see coming. And whatever happened next, I knew I was already changed forever by the way he had looked at me, and by the way I had looked back.